You know, every major hack you hear about, it doesn't start with some crazy explosion of code. Nope, it starts with a whisper. It begins with this silent, kind of methodical art of digital detective work. We call it footprinting, and really, it's all about gathering intelligence long before a single line of malicious code ever gets written. So let's dive in and see how it's really done. All right, so first things first, forget all that frantic keyboard smashing you see in Hollywood movies. That's not how it works. A real cyber attack begins way more quietly. It all starts with one single, super crucial question. What do I know about my target? The answer to that question? Well, it's built piece by painstaking piece through what we call reconnaissance. And that whole reconnaissance phase, it has a name, footprinting. Think of it as the systematic process of collecting pretty much every possible piece of information you can find about a target. So, what's the end game? The goal is to build a complete, detailed blueprint of their entire digital presence and, of course, to pinpoint every single potential weakness along the way. Okay, so here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we're going to look at the two main types of reconnaissance. Then, we'll dig into what attackers are actually looking for. After that, we'll see how they can basically weaponize a tool you probably use every single day. Yep, Google. And finally, we'll check out some specialized search engines they use to find information on people. But look, not all intelligence gathering is created equal. An attacker has to choose their approach, and it pretty much boils down to two very distinct methods, passive and active. So first up, you've got passive footprinting. The best way to think about this is pure stealth, right? You're basically a detective observing from a distance. You're searching public records, news articles, social media, anything that doesn't directly touch the target's systems. You're just an observer in the shadows. But then you've got active footprinting. This is the complete opposite. It's direct, it's hands-on. Here, you're actually knocking on their digital doors, probing their network, sending packets to see what responds. Now, you get a lot more detail this way, but it's also noisy. It leaves tracks, and it carries a real risk of being detected. So it doesn't really matter if an attacker goes passive or active. At the end of the day, the goal is always the same. Collect all those specific puzzle pieces that will form a complete digital blueprint of their target. And this shopping list for an attacker, it really falls into three main buckets. First up is organization info. We're talking employee names, phone numbers, physical office locations. Then you have the network information. This is stuff like domain names, the blocks of IP addresses they own, network maps, that kind of thing. And finally, you've got system information. What operating systems are they running? What are their public email addresses? Maybe even some usernames. Now, you might be thinking that to get this kind of data, you need some super sophisticated secret hacker tools, right? Well, one of the most powerful recon tools out there is probably one you have open in another tab right now. That's right, I'm talking about Google. The technique has a funny name. It's called Google dorking or Google hacking. And just to be clear, this has nothing to do with attacking Google itself. It's all about using its incredibly powerful search engine with special advanced commands to dig up information that frankly was never supposed to see the light of day. And these advanced commands are really just basic building blocks. For example, the site operator lets you search inside just one specific website. In title, looks for keywords only in the title of a page. In URL, searches for words inside the web address itself. And file type is super useful. It lets you hunt for specific kinds of documents, like sensitive PDFs or spreadsheets that might have been left exposed. Okay, so let's see this in action because this is where it gets crazy. When you combine these operators, you can build these incredibly specific queries. A simple search like in URL/ssvpnlogin.html can instantly pull up corporate VPN login portals all over the internet. Another query might find sensitive server configuration files just lying around. And you know what the scary part is? This isn't a flaw in Google. It's a misconfiguration on the target's end. All Google did was, well, helpfully index it for absolutely anyone to find. Yeah, this whole practice is so common that there's literally a public library for these queries. It's called the Google Hacking Database, or GHDB for short. It's just a massive searchable list of these dorks that security pros use to find everything from exposed login pages to sensitive internal documents and even vulnerable servers. But here's the thing. Google is great at indexing the web. But what about all the other stuff connected to the internet? You know, like routers, security cameras, even industrial control systems. For that, you're going to need a completely different kind of search engine. And this is exactly where tools like Shodan and Sensi's come into play. See, they aren't searching websites, they're searching for things that are connected to the internet. Shodan, for instance, is like a search engine for every exposed server, webcam, and even factory control system online. And then there's Census, which gives you this deep dive analysis of what each of those systems is running. When you put them together, well, they give an attacker a kind of God's eye view of a target's entire exposed hardware. All right, so we've talked about networks and systems. But let's be honest, the most valuable and a lot of the time the most vulnerable part of any organization is its people. And that's exactly why the next phase of footprinting zeroes right in on that human element. So an attacker is going to scour all these public sources to build a really detailed picture. I mean, LinkedIn, it's an absolute goldmine for employee names and job titles. Then you have people search services like Spokeo that can pull up addresses and contact info. Even job postings are incredibly valuable. Think about it. A listing for a senior Cisco firewall administrator just told an attacker exactly what brand of firewall that company is using. Now, manually searching through all of these different sources would take forever. It's super time-consuming. And that's exactly why attackers use automated tools to do all the heavy lifting for them. One of the most famous ones is a tool called the Harvester. And here's a perfect example of how it works. You run a single, simple command telling the Harvester to go scrape LinkedIn for, say, Microsoft employees. And boom, what you get back is a nice, clean list of names and their job titles. Now, for an attacker, this isn't just some list. This is a targeting manifest for a future social engineering attack. But the Harvester doesn't just stop at names. Oh no. It also scours the web for any publicly available email addresses linked to that company. And every single valid email it finds, that's another potential door to kick in, another entry point for a phishing campaign, or maybe a brute force password attack. When you boil it all down, it's just like the slide says. Before a heist, you case the joint. Before a cyber attack, you perform footprinting. It's that patient, methodical reconnaissance that lays the groundwork for absolutely everything that comes next. It's all about knowing your target better than they even know themselves. So, we've just walked through the tools and techniques an ethical hacker uses to map out a target. And that leaves us with one last, pretty important question to think about. Now that you've seen what's possible, how visible is your digital footprint? How much of your own information, or your company's, is just out there for the taking?